When it comes to narcissism, there can be a lot of similarities, even crossovers, when it comes to a sense of victimhood and a sense of martyrdom. But the differences would be that with victimhood, well, a narcissist might claim that they deserve special treatment because no one has ever had it as bad as they have. With martyrdom, however, what we often see is the misunderstood, long-suffering, wounded, or unappreciated hero. Because no one has ever sacrificed as much as they have, and no one has ever suffered so much on behalf of others. But the thing is, narcissistic people tend to be self-serving, and once you know what you're dealing with, they can be quite predictable. You can spot the same patterns of behaviour over and over again, regardless of how it presents. And with a narcissist who plays the martyr, it's pretty much the same thing. Because this isn't a person who sacrifices quietly for some kind of a cause, or maybe suffers due to perhaps being overly generous. Rather, it's more a calculated pattern of behaviour where their struggles, their sacrifices, are used as a tool for control, admiration, and attention. Because narcissistic people have an inflated sense of self-importance, and this requires constant external validation. This is known as narcissistic supply, and there are many different ways they'll try to get that supply. And portraying themselves as someone who selflessly and repeatedly sacrifices their own needs for others is just one of those ways. So what you really see is the need for attention and admiration being fed through a performance of suffering and self-sacrifice. And to be fair, it isn't always easy to spot at first because it's usually camouflaged as kindness, generosity, or maybe a sense of morality. But the thing is, the self-sacrifice isn't really about altruism. It's more about demonstrating their superiority through their capacity to endure suffering. It's a self-serving strategy to gain attention, power, and control by convincing other people that they're good, selfless, noble people trying to do the right thing. This is the person who fights the good fight on behalf of others, who consistently stays late at work, takes on everybody else's burdens, and it's always done publicly. And even though they might claim to be selfless and don't want recognition, they'll still complain about a lack of appreciation if they don't get the admiration they think they deserve. And here we would often see exaggerated victimhood, sometimes even resentment. There can be attempts to inflict feelings of guilt and obligation on others. There could be emotional blackmail to try to gain loyalty, concessions, favours, even resources. All commonly wrapped up in phrases like, "After all I've done for you." But the martyrdom also works as a way of keeping relationships in a state of unbalance, in the sense that others have to be eternally grateful for the narcissist's efforts. Some people are even led to believe that their own needs are selfish or unimportant, because other things, other people, are far more needy or deserving of the narcissist's attention. So some of the common ways which narcissists display their martyrdom would be, first of all, how charity begins with an audience. Any good deed is done loudly and publicly. Because narcissistic martyrs don't just sacrifice quietly, they make sure everyone gets to see it or at least hear about it. So it's really more performative rather than genuine, because they want people to see them in action. And even when they complain about how their acts go unnoticed, well, that complaint is aimed at eliciting sympathy or guilt. Now, an example of martyrdom would be like maybe taking over as the host at someone else's party. They make sure all the guests are okay, they have something to eat, they're all being entertained. But this is often while they ignore their own partner or even their own family. And their justification is that they didn't want the poor host to be burdened. And after the party, well, they might complain that they're exhausted. They never got to relax and enjoy themselves like everyone else did, because no one helped them take over as the host. Or they might insist on doing all the work on some kind of a project, but they ignore or refuse any offers of help. And afterwards, they make sure everyone sees or hears about their hard work, everything they had to do alone, and usually with an exhausted sigh. Now, they don't want help because that might mean having to share the spotlight, because they want people to see them as the selfless hero who saved the day. And here's the thing, if you do try to help, well, they'll complain that you're in the way. But if you don't offer help, well, they'll complain that you don't care or you're lazy. Because the only response a narcissistic person wants is excessive praise. They want to hear things like they're amazing, you couldn't have done it without them, and how they saved the day. So again, it's more about securing their narcissistic supply than any actual service. They want to hear how impressed and grateful people are. Secondly, there could be a favour or a gift that you didn't ask for or maybe even need. Now, to be fair, yes, sometimes these things may actually be useful, and you may be grateful and show your appreciation. Other times, maybe not so much. It could even be something that causes you more problems in the long run. Narcissistic people tend to lack insight, and they don't always recognize the difference between a good thing and the right thing. So what they do is usually based on what either makes them feel good or look good to others. And they can struggle with the idea that what they did wasn't what someone wanted or needed. And if you don't show any or even enough gratitude, well, they'll show upset, sometimes even outrage. Because that was for you. That cost a lot of money, a lot of time, a lot of effort. You're so ungrateful and you're so selfish. You appreciate nothing. Other times, the act or the gift isn't just about trying to be nice. It's about them. It can be a way to try to control others. It's to try to create a sense of obligation in people, something they can call in at any time and as often as they want. Whatever it is they did, you owe them forever. Number 3, and this would commonly be seen in organisations, community settings, workplaces. To be fair, it's even quite prevalent on social media. But that's where we see high-minded principles and hyper-morality. Now, they're still self-serving, controlling and pompous, but it's all hidden behind doing the right thing. They're overly virtuous, overly moral, super loyal and hyper-driven. They don't care what happens to them because this is for the company, this is for the team, this is for those who need their help. This is the hill they will die on. And as is common with narcissism, typically you see exaggerated responses to being challenged or called out. For instance, in a workplace, they'll claim that they're being bullied if they're called out for spending their time doing pretty much anything other than their actual job. They're not just being disagreed with, they are being persecuted for trying to do the right thing. They aren't being held to account, they're being targeted for being noble and generous. You can also see them play the role of the virtuous victim, and they flip the script very quickly because they're not bullying or harassing or maybe trying to dominate people. Rather, they're standing up for whatever they think gives them a sense of importance, whatever they think is morally right. And any flack they receive or consequences they might face is evidence of their martyrdom. Next, and this is a term I heard quite recently, and that's where we see their trauma Olympics. And this is seeing their sacrifices and their suffering as some kind of competition. For instance, you say you're tired, well, they're exhausted. You might like a glass of water, but they're dehydrated. You held the door open for someone and they had to buy someone a whole building. Other people's experiences are not just devalued, they're dismissed. And any conversation becomes a competition that you're not meant to win. Because no one has had to go through the things they've went through or does as much as they do. And they can use that sense of self-sacrifice and struggle as a shield to excuse their bad behaviour. So it's not really about trying to connect with others in any kind of meaningful way or even doing something for someone they genuinely believed was the right thing to do. Rather, they use their suffering to dominate conversations as a way to silence anyone's concerns about their behaviour or to try to evade accountability. Because narcissistic people tend to struggle with anything they consider to be criticism. To be fair, they tend to struggle with reality as well. So being a martyr can be a way of either justifying or shifting the focus from their toxic behaviour. Number 5. For a narcissistic martyr, it's all about hardship. And not having a struggle of some kind, whether that's their own struggle or on behalf of others, well, it can feel like a life without purpose. Because you can't be a victim without having someone to victimize you. You can't be a hero without having someone to rescue or a villain to defeat. It's like their sense of self-worth is tied to having problems to overcome. So if a crisis doesn't exist, they'll either create one or go looking for one. They move from one emergency to another, one issue to the next, and as one battle is over, a new one emerges. Because every solution has a problem, and every resolution is somehow unfair. So they're either the unluckiest person you've ever met, or it's just a tactic aimed at keeping the chaos going. They need the drama because stability doesn't give any opportunity for them to perform their suffering and to try to receive attention. And this can leave the people around them in a state of constant exhaustion. But that being said, quite often that's the point. Moving on to number 6, a narcissistic martyr can be drawn to other people who have problems. They want to fix people, so they might offer advice and solutions, and to be fair, some of that advice might actually be useful. But more often than not, it can be overly simplistic or maybe poorly thought out. And it's usually based on what they feel, what they think sounds good, or what makes them look good. Very rarely is there any real depth to it. Which leads on to number 7, and that is how support is often a one-way street. Because no matter how much they might complain about how much they do, they refuse help and support whenever it's offered. They want to be the person who gives help, not the person who receives it. So any offer of support is usually rejected, either that, or they will complain it's not enough. And this helps them to stay at the centre of the drama, and they get to maintain that sense of martyrdom. And lastly, a narcissistic martyr can be quite good at volunteering other people's services or offering other people's resources to those in need. And sometimes they can do it in a way that the person actually knows nothing about it, so they're caught off guard whenever they're called to help. And it's difficult for them to say no because they're now in a position where others are depending on them. Or they go looking for something they own only to find out that the narcissist has either loaned it or given it to someone they decided needed it more. And it is selfish for them to want it back. Really, there's no limit to a narcissist's generosity when it comes to using other people's time, energy, and resources. So to summarise, quite often what you see with narcissistic people who play the martyr is a behaviour that exaggerates their self-sacrifice just to achieve ulterior goals, whether that's getting dominance, attention, admiration, evading accountability, or whatever. They'll complain about their struggles, but rarely, if ever, accept help. In fact, they can even become irritable and angry if others do start helping, because they want to be seen as brave and selfless, tragic, or maybe a generous, sensitive person who's just unappreciated. No one does as much as them or has sacrificed as much for others because they're so good. But what you usually find is that they will have the same kinds of conversations with so many people about how much they do, and yet they're still claiming they don't want recognition and they don't like talking about it. And when they do ask for advice, they generally don't take it because it's not about solving anything. It's more about taking up space in other people's heads. They don't want solutions or an end to their crises or their battles. They just want to draw other people into their world of misery, sacrifice, and exhaustion. They want to be seen as the struggling, wounded, noble hero. And those they draw into their fantasy aren't there to support them, help them, even try to heal them. They're either there as an audience or as supporting characters in this ongoing drama of suffering. So that's a brief outline of how narcissistic people tend to play the martyr. Now, if there's anything I've missed, anything you'd like to add, please feel free to use the comment section. There are some interesting conversation starts from these videos. I'm Darren McGee, and if you find this topic to be useful, please consider subscribing to my channel. And until next time, thanks for watching.